Welcome to Cosmic Narratives.
At the foot of the mountains, nestled among rolling hills, lay a village untouched by time. It was a peaceful place, where the air smelled of pine and the distant hum of nature was the only sound that greeted the dawn. The villagers lived simple, quiet lives, untouched by the chaos of the world beyond. Yet, beyond the village's borders, a creeping fog rolled down from the forest, bringing with it an ancient terror that no one could explain. The fog came without warning, silently creeping down from the dense forest that loomed like a dark sentinel at the edge of the village. For years, the villagers spoke of it only in hushed tones, if at all. They said it wasn't just the mist that was dangerous, but what followed it, the whispering shadows. Legend told of a malevolent force that lived in the fog, a presence that haunted the land long before the village's first stone was laid. The villagers knew little of its origin, only that its whispers had once driven the forest's original inhabitants into madness. Yet, no one dared to confront the truth of the legend, for fear of what it might awaken. It began like any other evening, with the sun dipping behind the mountain peaks, casting long shadows over the village. The fog rolled in slowly, so subtly at first that no one paid it much mind. But as the twilight deepened, the mist began to thicken, swirling in unnatural patterns. The air turned damp, the smell of earth and decay creeping in with the fog. At first, the villagers went about their evening routines, unaffected by the strange phenomenon. But as the fog crept closer, small, unsettling things began to happen. Doors that had been firmly shut creaked open of their own accord. Windows rattled in their frames as though a wind had passed through. Though the air was still, shadows lingered longer than they should have, stretching unnaturally across the walls. A few villagers ventured out, eager to see the fog up close. But when they returned, something was wrong. Their faces were vacant, their eyes distant, and they spoke in murmurs, words that no one could understand. It wasn't long before others began to notice. Those who ventured into the fog didn't return the same. They had become hollow shells of their former selves, driven mad by something beyond their comprehension. As night fell, the village grew silent, save for the soft, unsettling whispers that seemed to rise from the depths of the fog. They were faint at first, barely audible over the wind, but gradually, the voices grew louder, more distinct. They weren't the murmurs of the villagers. They were voices of unknown origin, filled with sorrow, madness, and anger. Those who had ventured into the fog began to hear them. The whispers weren't just sounds, they were invitations. Promises of forgotten knowledge, of secrets best left buried. And as the voices grew louder, so too did the madness that gripped those who heard them. Some villagers staggered out into the fog, drawn by a force they couldn't understand. They walked without purpose, their eyes glazed, their bodies stiff. Others stayed inside, terrified to leave, but the whispers followed them, crawling beneath their skin, filling their minds with images of things they could not unsee. The fog had a power, a force that invaded their thoughts and stole their sanity. With each passing moment, the boundaries between reality and the dreamlike world of the fog grew thinner. The village was no longer a safe haven. It was a prison, surrounded by a force that had no mercy. As the night deepened, the village was fully enveloped by the fog. There were no stars, no moon, only an all-encompassing darkness. The villagers who had been affected by the whispers began to act erratically. Their once familiar faces now twisted with fear. Some screamed at unseen horrors, their voices lost in the winds. Others retreated, into their homes, shaking, muttering incoherently to themselves. The fog seemed to feed on their fear, growing thicker, more suffocating with each passing minute. Shadows danced just beyond the corners of their vision, shadows that didn't quite belong to the villagers. Their movements were erratic, their forms distorted, as though they were no longer fully part of the world. The villagers who remained unaffected were not immune to the fear. They watched in horror as their friends and family slipped away into madness, their sanity devoured by the whispers. The ground beneath them seemed to shift as though the very earth was conspiring with the fog to swallow them whole. Faces appeared in the mist, contorted, silent screams, eyes wide with terror. They were not the faces of the villagers. No, these were the faces of those who had vanished long ago, trapped in the fog, their souls twisted by the malevolent force that now consumed the village. In the heart of the village, as the fog churned in every corner, a lone figure, an elder, a survivor of the fog's earlier reign, gathered those few still clinging to their sanity. She spoke of the ancient curse, of a betrayal long forgotten, and the spirit that had been trapped within the forest centuries ago. The fog was not just a natural occurrence. It was the breath of the trapped spirit, a manifestation of its power. The shadows that followed it were not mere illusions, they were its whispers, and they fed on the fear of the living. The villagers had unknowingly been feeding this curse for generations. Every time they entered the fog, every time they gave into the whispers, they strengthened its hold. Now, the curse was ready to claim them all, to consume the very essence of their souls. The elder's words struck with the weight of truth, but there was little time to act. The village was already in the grip of the fog, its shadows closing in. The survivors knew that if they did not act, they too would become nothing but whispers in the dark. As the fog consumed the last of the village, the few remaining villagers made a final, desperate attempt to escape. They ran through the streets, their breath shallow, the whispers following them, growing louder with each step. But there was no escape. The fog was everywhere, seeping into every corner, twisting the world into a nightmarish version of itself. The last survivors realized that the fog could not be outrun. It could not be escaped. To break the curse, a sacrifice had to be made. The village's fate was sealed, but in the dying moments, the survivors made an offering, one that would end the curse but cost them dearly. It was a final attempt to break free of the fog's grip. As the village was left in ruins, the fog began to dissipate slowly, its whispers fading into the distance. The survivors, broken and defeated, watched as the fog cleared, but something remained, something that could not be destroyed: the shadows. The fog receded, leaving an eerie silence in its wake, but just as it seemed safe, one final whisper echoed through the empty streets. It was faint, distant, but unmistakable. The shadows had not left, they were still there, lingering in the corners of the village, waiting for the next cycle, for the next soul to fall victim to the whispers. And so the village fell into legend, its name forgotten by all but those who knew the true horrors it had faced. The fog never truly left. It waits, always waiting for the next to enter, to hear the whispers, and to be consumed by the shadows.
Thank you for exploring with us. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Join us again as we dive into new worlds and timeless tales. Until next time, keep your eyes on the stars.